There's a food item served in Irish pubs that is revered so much that it's a surprise that some of them haven't been designated UNESCO heritage dishes or given special PDO protections by the European Union. It's a dish whose recipe is known to only a mere few 100,000 bar staff around the island of Ireland. I'm referring, of course, to the saviour of the empty-stomached drinker, the after-work pint man or woman's best friend, the toasted sandwich. Welcome to Publin, a podcast about the culture, history and heritage of pubs at home and abroad. Two slices of bread, a lash of butter, some ham of reasonable width, and a cheese, one level above easy single, but no fancier than that. These are the component parts of the most common food served in Dublin and Irish pubs for decades and decades. Stick one of these under a grill and you've got yourself a solution, temporary though it may be, to the fact that you didn't have a proper dinner and you want to keep on going in the pub without having to break your pact of crack with your pals at the table. It's a cheap, reliable godsend that boasts near uniformity in any pub you go to. The bread is usually the same, some form of cheap white tasting bread, or maybe a batch loaf if you're very lucky. Ham that comes reasonably thinly sliced but isn't quite wafer, and definitely hasn't been hacked off a loin roasted anywhere near the premises you're eating in. And cheese that is processed enough to guarantee a bright nuclear yellowish colour and maximum stringiness when pulled apart. It's picture perfect in its own little way. Anyone listening from abroad or from another culture must be thinking to themselves that, these toasties must be quite the delicacy. Well, no, they're a bit crap. And that's the point. Of course, I'm romanticising it here, but that's what people do. There's a strange pride in its crappiness. It's comfort food at its most essential, and people get quite reverential for holdovers from times of Dublin past. I had planned on doing an episode about toasties in some form or another for a while, but what's the format? What I've described to you is essentially it. There's no grand history of when the first toasted sandwich was served, not that I know anyway, and there's no great tales about publicans famous for their toasted sandwiches or the exoticness of their recipes. There's no Michelin star for these bad boys, but they're still worth thinking about. And then I got an email from a guy named Eoin, who I've interacted with a lot through social media over the years, but never met in person. He's a graphic illustrator, and a few years back he did a really cool toasty graphic that did the rounds on social media. He suggested that I do an episode of this podcast on the toastie. So I said, why don't you join me as a guest, and why not? Let's go to a few pubs on a toasted sandwich pub crawl and then put them to the test. The idea isn't to find the absolute best toasted sandwich in town. There's loads of contenders for that crown, but what we wanted to do was put ourselves amongst it and get philosophical about what makes a good toasted sandwich. In fact, Eoin has written a 10 commandments on toasties that we kept in mind as we ate our way around Dublin. Here's the toasty man himself.
Hi, my name is Eoin Whelehan. I'm an illustrator from Dublin, and I am also a toasty sandwich enthusiast. So I started a project where I was making a different piece of art in a different style each day, and I was always trying to come up with new ideas, and always liked the idea of doing a kind of an illustrated guide to something in Dublin. I thought it'd be nice to do something that hadn't been done. And to my shock and surprise, nobody had properly documented the various pubs that serve toasties. So I did a little illustration, picked about, I think it was 21 pubs, and created a little graphic with a toasted sandwich split in half with some cheesy bridges across the Liffey. And that's where the idea for the blog started. I've actually had to update it a few times because of pubs closing or losing their status, that we say.
And so, on a Tuesday afternoon, myself and Eoin went off on a wee bread-heavy journey around the streets of Dublin, exploring the culinary side of Dublin pubs.
Okay, so we're waiting on our first toastie here in Grogan's. I'm semi-talking to the audience and also to Eoin, who's sitting across from here. It's a bit of a weird experience to sit outside Grogan's knowing you're mic'd up.
Yeah.
But
Undercover toasty eaters.
yeah. So today, I suppose we're exploring the various types of toasties, such as there are. I think they're all, to an outsider, I'd say to like a French person coming to Dublin, there's probably much of a muchness between all these toasties, but it holds a special place in pub culture and lore in Ireland, I would say, because it is the unwritten thing about it is like that they're actually a bit crap, but that's kind of what we like about them. It's a comfort food. That's.
I think that's fair. I don't think the toastie should go above its station in that.
No, absolutely.
Traditionally, it's something to kind of keep you going if you're having a couple of casual drinks with mates and you may be thinking,
it's a last resort.
It wouldn't even be a soup kind of place. It would be
No.
There's no kitchen. It's a toaster. It's a grill. It's probably in a cellophane bag. It might be pre-prepared, and it just does the job.
Yeah, this is how the microplastics are getting into our food, is through that bag that they stick into the toaster. But I mean, you're having an unhealthy night out anyway, so
yeah.
What's a few shards of cellophane in it?
Yeah.
I mentioned the word toasty. Oh, lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Okay, so I'm going to interject myself because I think this breaks one of your 10 rules of toasties, whereby it has a napkin that may or may not stick to the toastie underneath, but it's excellent presentation, I have to say.
And it's cut in a
it's cut diagonally across.
Yes, which is what you want.
That's exactly it. Bit of mustard. It looks pretty good.
Yeah.
To my eyes. That looks like kind of it's a white cheddar, I guess. I was going to say it's an Emmental, but it's hardly that, is it?
Well, from my first observation, the cheese is melted and the ham looks like it's kind of deli ham, which again gets points.
It's not a wafos.
No.
Okay, I'm going in. Just have to edit out the sound of crunching.
Yeah.
It's a good toastie.
It's a very tasty toastie. And immediately makes me wonder, for years now they've generally almost had somebody on toastie duty. Yeah, like there's so many staff, and it's a big bar, which again is quite different to a one-man show.
There's usually, like, as you say, like 4 people or so behind the bar. Usually in any other place it's lashing out pints, but here it's lashing out toasties. What of the bread actually now? We're coming towards the end of crust number 2. So what are you going to give this out of 10?
I'd have to give it a fairly solid 8. Whether it's the best toastie in town, we won't know today or maybe ever, but it ticks most of the boxes.
Well, we kicked off our toasty crawl in a place that hasn't lost any of its toasty credentials or status, and that was Grogan's. What do you think now at a degree of remove? Do you think that was a good start to the toasty pub crawl? Did that set the standard?
I think it was a good choice in the end, even though we did try to go to 1 or 2 other places first. Grogan's is kind of, I think it's the gold standard in a lot of people's eyes for just I think more the toasty experience than necessarily the toasty itself. It's somewhere that people just have history and memories of sitting outside, maybe lingering over a pint, thinking, should I go home? Will I have the dinner? Maybe I'll get a toasty. And it's kind of the ubiquitous go-to for the Dublin Toastie experience. And it is a pretty good toastie, it has to be said.
So there we have it. A good start to our attempts to explore the toasted sandwiches of Dublin. We wanted to have 2 north and 2 south side pubs along the way, but as we were moving around the city, not everywhere was ready to receive us. So we had to make a slight alteration to the plan.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Cheers. It smells lovely. Try and get the rustle of the bag on mic there. This can't be safe. I'm sure it is.
Now, first thing I observe In the previous toastie, we didn't have a drink, and I'm quite glad that we have a half a stout here because it's a very dry sandwich. I'm actually having trouble. Yeah, it's going down, but with a little bit of help.
I concur. Once I've got the saliva together to.
This is kind of what you would expect, though, if you were to say this to X amount of people. What is a pub toastie? This kind of looks the part.
Who are we to judge? How many have we made in a pub toaster?
Yeah, the toasty sandwich with the butter on the outside is venturing into North American grilled cheese territory, which has its place, but I would be, off the top of my head, I can only think of one bar in Dublin that does a kind of sandwich press toasty, and that's the International, which again is a very different beast. And you're ending up with the big bits on the side that might go a bit crispy, and it's always volcanically hot.
You're a real purist, though. I'm kind of a bit more sanguine about bread and stuff in between. Heat it up. Okay, so out of 10 on.
For the pub that we're in toasty, I would say it's probably going to be a 6.
Really? Okay. That high?
Maybe a 5. Yeah.
Now, having experienced what I would say is a bad toasty a few weeks ago, in Beep pub on Beep Street, I would say this is definitely obviously not the worst, but it's not burnt or anything. It's just I'm gonna go 5.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to.
We went for a bit of a ramble around Dublin. We tried to go to the Flowing Tide, but what happened there to us?
So they did confirm that they were serving the toastie, because you just don't know in this day and age where pubs are being taken over or are starting to serve pizzas and various other things. And the toastie is, to me anyway, is kind of relates back to pubs of a certain era where you're really only talking about crisps and peanuts as another option. But unfortunately, we arrived, I think, too early. The toasties hadn't arrived. We were in ahead of the toasties and they didn't have them. So we had to go elsewhere, which is a shame.
I can only assume they were coming from some chef's kitchen that he was still making them to perfection. And that's why they hadn't made it to the Flowing Tide, alas. And also, to our detriment, the Lord Edward happened to be closed because we were doing this during the day. So we will have to go back for a round 2 to try out the Lord Edward, because I think you rate it quite highly.
I gave it, I think, on the blog, which I did start after I'd done the infographic, because I started thinking, well, I've put all these toasty pubs on the map, but I couldn't really stand over all of them because I hadn't really rated them or ranked them. So I just thought it might be fun to actually start doing little toasty reviews, which is, pure folly, really.
You said it's folly to rate toasties, and you would think that it's the simplest thing in the world to put a toasted sandwich together, but we found, to our detriment, when we stumbled foolishly into our second pub that will remain nameless, that is a lovely pub that I would say would have a good toasty experience overall, but the toasted sandwich itself was a bit of a letdown. Have you recovered from the dryness of that toasty?
Just about. I mean, it's a hot day today, so it's all coming back to me, but that was a good example of a toasty that you really did need to wash down with something, because one of the many toasty commandments that I tried to come up with as a kind of a set of guidelines for what you need to have in place is the bread was just incredibly dry, and I don't think a lot of money was spent on it. That might have been reflected in the price of the toasty or not. Yeah, it made for a very difficult toasty experience.
Oh dear. Not the greatest of choices, but I'm a firm believer that you have to experience the bad to appreciate the good. And as we said before, these sandwiches' chief purpose is just to keep you in the pub, and this one certainly did just that. So no hard feelings to this pub, we won't hold it against them. So we went onwards in search of a higher standard of toasty. A few kilometres of walking later and we arrived at our third location, a place we expected to be of the upper crust when it comes to toasty standards in Dublin. It's a pub called Cummiskey's on Dominic Street, a favourite of both of ours and home turf for Eoin, who lives nearby. It was at this point that toasty fatigue was really setting in. Good as they may have been, they're a dry dish, and Guinness isn't exactly known for its thirst-quenching abilities. We thought that we might get a bit more variety in the form of a batch bread version or a thick-cut ham, but the nature of the beast is that it's standardised.
I'm just going to narrate this. Owen is opening the sandwich with great ceremony. Napkin to the side.
Cellophane bag. Hot to the touch. And again, we're looking at a pretty standard looking white slice pan. I have experienced on occasion a brown slice pan.
Okay.
It's actually quite a nice variation.
Right. Only the connoisseurs, the real fans of toasties will get that one, you know. Have you ever in your life put a brown sauce on a toastie?
I'm not a brown sauce man.
Yeah, it's more of a Northern Ireland kind of thing.
Superior cheese.
Oh yeah. What's going on with the cheese?
Yeah. It tastes like those packs of thinly sliced cheddar that you can get.
You get like a 10-pack of Charleville kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they've got that like a proper cheesy taste as opposed to something that just goes into nothing.
Yeah.
So,
oh my god.
That's a subtle but a noted difference. And I know we're kind of unnaturally cramming this into an afternoon, but I think it does make the point that one at the right time is absolutely perfect for what it needs to be, and then you might kind of think at some point you're going to go home for your dinner.
Yeah,
but
because it's like having 3 in a row is not. It's not exactly a flavor explosion. It's not, as you mentioned, it's not like going around Bilbao and getting pinchos and tapas.
No, let's not pretend. This experience is ebbing and flowing from a trail to a quest to possibly an endurance.
I just think of that like after we haven't eaten that much. But like,
so attempt 3 out of 5 on the third one. I would say is definitely an upgrade on the previous one.
Yes. But still, I don't think it's better than the Grogan's one.
No.
So, like, I think we were saying on the walk up here that I have often heard it said that people say that the Grogan's Toastie is overrated. And if you compare it with, you know, what a toastie is capable of being outside the confines of a pub, then that's probably correct. But in terms of making a very simplistic sandwich, that was the most true to form. Mm-hmm. The one with the most moisture in it.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing, trust me. And we didn't even have a drink with it as well, actually.
Yeah.
So we didn't have, not that we have beer goggles on now, we had 2 half pints of Guinness, but it's looking pretty rosy at the moment. Now, we haven't had a spread of, so we're talking about fatigue of what we're about to eat, but do you now feel at this point a fatigue of trying to think of something else to say about 2 slices of bread with a little bit of meat in between?
There is
you, dear listener, do you feel fatigue approaching?
There is a limit that you can kind of reach out.
We might never want to meet again after this.
We'll sit on opposite sides of pubs, eating our toasties and not speaking.
So what would be your out of 10 rating for this then? So we've had an 8 and a 6, I think, from you, and an 8 and a 5 from me.
Logically, it's going to be a 7.
I would concur with that, I have to say.
Pub 3, which we went to, which was Cummiskey's, which is your local. A fine pub. I think it was a decent toasted sandwich, but by that stage, we were having real bread fatigue. But did you still think it was an enjoyable sandwich? Ham and cheese?
I thought it was a extremely acceptable sandwich, and served at the table with the requisite condiments, which is what you're looking for. I believe it was cut diagonally for us. So, yeah, it ticked a lot of the boxes. But I did have to say that there is definitely drawbacks to doing a toasty crawl, which is possibly why you may not have heard about it up until now.
On to our next and last stop, the Great Hope for Salvation. At this point, we were really hoping that a toasted special might be an option. Aren't all toasties special? Yes, but to let the uninitiated know, a toasted special differs from your regular toastie in that it has a few more ingredients, including your standard ham, but also with tomato, onion, and lettuce. It's a slightly fancier version. To find this holy grail of the holy grain, we moved on to Tommy O'Gara's pub in Stoneybatter. Would Tommy's and Rocky the barman deliver? Well, of course, they always drop it down to your table, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm at the end of this odyssey. I'm actually now a little bit excited again. So this is the shot in the arm that we needed. Well, hopefully, anyway.
All right, dig in. I don't know if I want to put mustard on this all the same.
I might kind of take it for a spice and see what it needs. Yeah, there's a noticeable difference in like this is. If you were in the position where you should have gone home an hour or so ago and you're thinking, I really need a little bit of sustenance, this is what you want to be seeing. I think they're displaying a very strong sense of confidence with their sandwich. That you might squeeze a bit of mustard in there, but you don't really even need it. There's a lot going on there. I think that puts this place on the map in my mind anyway. Bar maybe the pat of butter and maybe a little jar of mustard, I'd say there's not much wrong with that, so I'd give it a 9.
I say as Toasties go, what's it 10?
I wouldn't really argue with that, yeah.
What more do you want?
Yeah.
We did, thankfully and unintentionally, save, I think, the best for last. Now, this might be because we went for the toasted special, so it was something a bit different. It was a sandwich alive with flavour and alive with moisture. That was, of course, in Tommy O'Gara's. Were you surprised you'd never eaten a sandwich there before?
I hadn't, and I will definitely be returning because despite our fatigue from going for our fourth sandwich of the afternoon, it was a very inviting and impressive delivery on the table, presentation, top marks, and I think it actually perked us back up at the end of our. I think we changed the wording from a trail to a quest to an odyssey by the time we had our toasty special. So I felt it was a journey worth embarking on.
So, are we now any the wiser about the great toasted sandwiches of Baile Clia? Well, honestly, no. As myself and Eoin said time and time again on our tour around that day, the toasted sandwich is always about the set and the setting and the role it plays in the overall pub experience. We weren't going out sinking pints on a session, and to be honest, that's the situation in which the toastie shines the most. So, while it was fun to discuss and philosophise about the toastie in its natural habitat, the enjoyment and understanding of this delicacy comes only through experiencing it. So I hope that this has been a lesson to all of you. Don't treat something that's not too fancy with too much a degree of seriousness. Just sit back, sink a pint, grab a toastie, and sink another one.
I'm too thirsty to drink water. You ask, what am I thirsty for? I'm thirsty for a life I can't afford. Check your book of life, the one you're reading. What was been so long is now too free.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Publin Podcast. This one was good fun to make, as you might imagine. I've never met Eoin before, and he was a great companion for this tasting tour. I definitely encourage you to check out Eoin's work on Instagram, particularly the Toasty map that is for sale on his website, which is owenwhelehan.carbonmade.com, and he's Eoin Whelehan Illustration on Instagram. He also did a cool design for an old Dublin character named the Hairy Lemon, which was inspired by the Hairy Lemon's mention on an episode of this podcast. So thanks again to Eoin, and definitely check out all of his fantastic work. If you know of some toasted sandwiches with a little bit of a twist or ones worth checking out, I'm definitely interested in testing them out recreationally. So you can send me, John, an email via publinie@gmail.com. I've got a cool concept for the next episode that I'm working away on, and I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to turn out well, and it might turn into a series if all goes well with it. The music used in this episode was Bread and Butter by Sun Little and Too Thirsty to Drink Water by Carl Blau. That's about it for this week, so all that's left to say is to wish you well, to enjoy your sunny outdoor pints wherever you are in the world. And also, if you were to share, rate and subscribe this podcast, I would be forever grateful. So now let me say, enjoy, cheers, and sláinte.